Welcome to Founder Radio. I'm your host, Hugo. In this podcast, you'll hear in-depth conversations with the globe's most exciting company founders. We'll talk about their ideas, their successes, their challenges, and their learnings along the way. At Founder Radio, we celebrate founders, and we believe that innovative founders are critical to deal with the challenges humans face. They are society's explorers and work in uncertainty to expand our practical knowledge each and every day. Building something from scratch requires creativity, intelligence, conviction, and endurance. Get inspired and learn from those that are changing the world. Hello, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us at Founder Radio. Today we're talking to Yorick Bruins of Wakuli. Yorick, welcome.
Hi, Hugo. Thank you.
Yorick is a co-founder of Wakuli. Their mission is to make coffee a force for good. They started off as a direct-to-consumer coffee brand. They've now started opening stores as well in Amsterdam and beyond. Yorick's worked in the food and agribusiness in Africa and in Asia. He's been a board member of Slow Food Condora in Turin. Also worked as a sous chef in an osteria in Turin. He has a bachelor in gastronomic services, a master's in food policy, the City University of London. And if I were to summarize your entire education and work experience in one word, Yorick, it would be food. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And thank you for the coffee. In advance of this recording, you sent me some Wakuli coffee. Much appreciated. The House Blend and the Discover Monthly. I drank all of it. How was it? It was great. Like, honestly, both very tasty, but also very mild, but like a good wine. It was really great. And I got myself a subscription. So looking forward to the next one.
That's good to hear. At least I converted one person.
Yes, exactly. So what's next for Discover Monthly?
Current Discover Monthly is coming from Peru. Mm-hmm. And I think you tried that one.
Yeah.
Might be. The next one will be coming from DRC, from the Congo.
Okay.
One of the most exciting coffees we have. Mm-hmm. And in terms of impact, one of the best stories ever. I mean, I've worked in Eastern Congo since before Wakuli, 2017, and good friends Marceline and her husband Bertin are running a cooperative on a small island in a war-prone area where they are producing coffee led by women, produced by women, as a force for good, to try to make sure that there is some bottoms-up approach to actual economic and social development for the people in Eastern Congo, which you might know is one of the worst places to live on earth at the moment.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah. That's an incredible story. I can't wait for the coffee. You know, this definitely gives a lot of extra depth that I wasn't aware of. And Yorick, just for everyone to follow along, could you describe in your own words what Wakuli does?
Yeah, of course. I mean, you already did a great job there. But in the end, we're trying to reimagine the coffee supply chain by, in the most direct way, connect consumers and producers through high quality coffee. Therefore, creating a win-win between the two. And in short, making high quality coffee available and affordable for a big audience. Right now, still Western Europe with a focus on the Netherlands. And at the same time, creating a better, fairer, and more stable long-term market and market access for smallholder coffee farmers all around the world. Right now, from around 13 countries that we're sourcing from. Long-term, investing not only in quality, but also in regeneration of their farms for a future-proof, stable coffee supply.
Wow. Okay. And I've heard you and also your co-founders and colleagues talk a lot about changing the system. To start off with, what's wrong with the current system, say, where the largest volume of coffee is being produced and sold?
Well, to start, coffee historically has been, first of all, produced in the global south, the majority of it, and consumed in the global north, right? So you have a big divide between producing and consuming countries. And therefore, we need to go back a little bit to colonial times. And actually, the role of the Dutch that played by trading coffee from Yemen back in the days to Dutch India or Indonesia, right? Current Indonesia. And from there, coffee went all around the world, being actually produced in a place where historically there's no consumption and then shipped to countries like the Netherlands and other countries in Western Europe to be consumed. That historic divide has always been in place and is still the case today. And instead of big colonial powers back in the days, it's now about big conglomerates. You can think the Nestle's, the JDE Peets of this world. They are trading the majority of coffee, one of the biggest consumed global commodities worldwide, right? We're talking about $200 billion in retail value, more or less. And these few players have a lot of power. They buy cheap and they sell relatively expensive, still too cheap, but relatively expensive for what they buy it for. And they keep that disconnect between that consumer and producer. They keep that in place to make sure that they have a business they can thrive on, right? And you see that if you look at the valuations of these companies, the public markets, they're doing really, really well. A lot of coffee or a lot of money is being earned in coffee, but not by the people that produce it, not by the 12.5 million smallholders around the world. That's what historically coffee looks like. It's an hourglass model. It's a lot of producers, a lot of consumers, and a few people in the middle. It's not the only commodity where it happens, but because of the physical distance and the historical relevance of it, we see that right now consumers are being shipped off with dark roasted, low quality coffee and producers with a very bad business model in the end.
Got it. And what does the value chain look like? Is it basically one step from farmers to consumers, or are there many, many smaller interim steps in between?
Many steps in between. We're seeing value chains with between 10, sometimes even 15 steps. And on purpose, right? Because in the end, nobody really wants to work directly with smallholder farmers together, because then you also have responsibility. And indeed, there is a physical, right? A geographic distance. So what you often see is a smallholder farmer. And now I'm talking especially about smallholders because that's our focus, but it's also because the majority of coffee farmers in the end, 85% are smallholders. Talking about less than 3 hectares, 2 to 3 hectares. They often have to sell locally to what you call in the Spanish context coyotes, or in bad middlemen, let's say, that at a very low price purchase coffee directly from the farm or through a cooperative. Then it goes to a local auction, for example, or other local buyers. It gets exported. From export level, it goes to a big trader, the big trade houses, traditionally in Hamburg or Switzerland, that purchase it. And they sell it again to big roasters. Big roasters might roast and sell it to another coffee brand. The coffee brand sells it to the supermarket that sells it in the end to you. It's a very opaque value chain. There's no responsibility to really talk where coffee is coming from because it's produced outside the European Union, right? We have very great legislation in Europe when we're talking about products made in the EU. But when it's outside the EU, it only needs to say that it's not produced in the European Union. That's the only responsibility coffee brands have, to talk about where the coffee comes from. That's how the value chain has historically been built, and still often is the case, even though it's not necessary anymore.
Okay. And if I were to buy 100 euros of coffee in Western Europe, how would that 100 euros be spread out over all those different steps in the value chain?
You will see 30%, like starting from the consumer end, 30% will go to the supermarket, right? 30 to 40%. Then another 30 to 40 will go to the big roaster. So think indeed Starbucks, JDE Peet's, or even 50%, by the way, JDE Peet's or Nestle, depending on the product, of course. This is very much generalized. Then some steps to traders and exporters. And in the end, an estimation, we can't know for sure, but most recent literature and research shows that around 5% stays behind on farm level.
Oh, wow. Yeah. And how does Wakuli do it? Like, how do you improve this system?
By simply cutting out everyone that is unnecessarily there in the chain and working directly with groups of smallholder farmers on that long-term planning, creating a win-win, right? Not only for us to make more impact, but to create a long-term way out of poverty for many smallholders, but also for us to tap into the potential that coffee can be. A very tasty, differentiated product that is not dark roasted and not commoditized and doesn't taste like shit, honestly. And I think what we're doing is we're identifying potential partners, or potential partners sometimes identifying us, right? Coming to us. I mean, in this world, everyone is on Instagram, also the average coffee lead farmer that is our age, right? Then we start talking if we can be of relevance for each other and can mean something for each other in a way that we can create a better market for them. And at the same time, they can upgrade their quality together with our investment to make sure that we directly leverage that great quality coffee to our end customer. So what does it mean practically? Smallholders work often in a cooperative or a type of association. That association is led by the farmers, right? So farmer-led, farmer-owned. We work with them. They or export directly if they have the right licenses and availability and possibility to do it. If not, we work with a trusted change maker in the country of origin. So someone who is from there, who helps us export that coffee or get that coffee ready. Those are often great friends of ours because they have relevance in their chain. They add value, right, by having a great service to us. And then it gets exported, it gets put on a ship, shipped around the world, and we import it directly here in the Netherlands. Roast it ourselves, package it ourselves. We've got our own distribution center, and we ship it directly to consumers' homes, or you can, of course, purchase it in our stores and bars.
Got it. Okay. So instead of maybe 10 different players in this value chain, it sounds like you cut out maybe 7 to 8, because there's you, there's the local change maker, and there might be a shipping company, and that's it, right?
Yeah, and important there that we decide pricing on farm level together with our local partners. So we don't pay on export level when the coffee leaves the harbor of origin, right, port of origin. We decide jointly with farmers what a good price is. And that starts from asking a farmer, what do you need for this coffee to actually not only survive, but thrive, right? What is the cost of production? We do research together in what it actually costs to produce a kilo of coffee. What is then a healthy margin? Because only if farmers thrive, we in the long term will thrive as Wakuli and especially all our customers as well.
Yeah. And in the Wakuli value chain, how does the income for the farmer look like in the example I gave earlier? So 100 euros of coffee in Western Europe, how much is there for the farmer in the end?
Depends a lot on our product, but also on the origin. Because you can imagine in origins where the scale of production is a bit more advanced, for example, looking specifically in the Latin American context, prices are relatively a bit lower because people can build a business on a different model. But you can think that on average, we pay between 25 and 30% of the pouch of coffee that you get at home goes to the farmer and to origin.
Yeah,
from the 5%, right, that we were talking about before.
So 4 to 5 times as much.
Yeah, and obviously that depends. I mean, there are years when the world's coffee prices, right, that are dominated by what is called the C price, which is set in New York. To be clear, right, that's all traded as future commodities. Sometimes it's very high, and then it comes close to the price that we pay. And at other times, we pay 3 or 4 times more. So where the whole world market fluctuates, and that's also directly one of the main issues in coffee. Coffee farmers don't know what they will be getting for the crop the moment they're producing. With us, they know before harvest how much we're going to buy and for what price. And we always pay the same price as last year or more. We never go down. If the market goes down, we stay up. And that price, therefore, is very stable. People can build a business on it. Because in the end, that stability is as important as a high price.
Got it. Yeah, you can plan ahead. You can invest.
Exactly.
And typically, Yorick, would the farmers you work with sell their entire harvest to Wakuli, or do they have several parties they work with? I can imagine that it's interesting to work with Wakuli, but also maybe sell some coffee on the world market, on the exchange you mentioned. What does that look like for you?
Yeah, again, unfortunately, there's no one story with 13 different origins on 3 different continents. But on average, we try to make sure farmers are never fully dependent on us.
Okay.
Because in the end, that's also a risk, right? We're still a startup. I mean, we're celebrating 5 years next year, but we're still young. We don't want full dependency of farmers on what we can purchase. So we normally purchase anywhere between 10 and 70 or 80% of the crop of a farmer. Okay. We are often the first ones to come in to purchase coffee directly, right? All the other stuff is sold locally or to the auction that then goes into the world's commodity system. But we're trying, as the first one in, trying to change the model and invest in farmers before harvest to find other buyers down the line who can pick up their piece of the puzzle and also purchase coffee from the farmers we work with, right? Because a lot of work is done, let's say, pre-purchasing the first crop, in upgrading the local environment to make sure that coffee is of high quality. And we're willing to do all that work for other buyers to then come in later and also tell the story of the farmers they're working with. We're more than happy to share, because in the end, like, we are just a very small drop in the bucket in terms of the world's coffee market, and we want other people to purchase the way we do.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I can imagine that's very attractive to the farmers. Do you get flooded by farmers and cooperatives that want to work with you?
There are way more farmers and co-ops that want to work with us than we can roast and sell here at the moment. Our biggest issue is not supply. Our biggest issue is, of course, building out our market share here. And obviously, we only can spend our euros once, or actually your euro, Hugo, once. And therefore, we want to spend that well where we can make most impact. And that's often with farmers that are most disconnected from the market, that really need a bit of a push because they've always been stuck in that old school trade model. We're trying to be the first ones to make that change, to show that it can be done differently, to then also unlock the potential of that farmer group and their coffee to other buyers.
Makes sense. I think, to me, your value prop for the farmers is super clear. What's your value prop or your proposal for consumers in Western Europe? There's a lot of competition. A lot of them are already in a certain groove in terms of coffee drinking. How do you
get them out of that and convince people to try Wakuli?
Yeah, super good question, and that's of course where we started with when we started a few years ago to ask like what is in there for customers and what are we currently seeing in the market. And what we're seeing is that the majority of coffee, especially at home, is being bought in the supermarket, right? 90+% in the Netherlands and in Germany is bought on the supermarket shelf. There are many brands, but in the end, according to us, it all tastes more or less the same. Again, dark roasted, low quality commodity coffee with a nice different logo and story. And then there is this small niche, which is called specialty coffee, right? Specialty coffee is a coffee that is not traded as commodity, that is differentiated, that has a flavor that is different from another coffee, that we can objectively say has a certain quality trait that makes it unique. And also, therefore, often more expensive. And that niche, that is your roaster in the street. If you live in Amsterdam or Utrecht or Rotterdam or whatever, it's a roaster that is in your street roasting small quantities of high quality coffee that's super expensive. If we want to change the coffee industry at large and we want to make sure that people consume differently, we need to make that offering, so coffee that tastes different, that really makes you want to make a brew another cup, accessible and affordable. And therefore, we need scale and we need that direct relation. Yeah. So we're currently small specialty coffee, right? That niche coffee segments that is max 5% of the market at the moment, which currently is trading very inefficiently because of the lack of scale, but also because they are not turning around the system at all, because they're still working with importers, exporters, etc. But just people who do it better. We said, what if we skip all those steps? We work directly with farmers, therefore can pay farmers way more, but are not losing a big part of the pie to all middlemen, even if they're good. And then at scale can deliver that to consumers at home. And I think that's the proposition. It's high quality coffee, but for a mid to top shelf supermarket price.
Yeah, and with a very positive impact that you'd otherwise not have. And it sounds like you're unlocking coffee growing areas as well that weren't unlocked before. I've never heard about being able to buy any coffee from Congo, for example.
No, and honestly, if we look at Congo, it's very interesting because in my world, I'm in a small coffee bubble, obviously. A lot of people have been talking about Congo as one of the great quality coffees out there, but nobody dares to work there because it's actually too difficult for many. I mean, again, war prone. I was there last year with my co-founder. We had to turn around when we came close to the border because rebels took over. It is not an easy place to work, but because it's not easy, we should not look somewhere else. It's very easy to work in Brazil. But we can't all buy coffee from Brazil because in the end, we're forgetting about those other 10 million farmers around the world.
Good coffee or die trying.
Exactly. Our new tagline.
You recently changed business model somewhat. In my mind, from direct to consumer to opening stores. It looks like you haven't completely closed the chapter of very direct to consumer. You still do that. There might be a lot of actually cross-pollination between the two. Could you tell us a little bit about what triggered the change, how you did that, and how it's going?
Yeah, for sure. When we started in 2019 and talking again about like changing the value chain for the better, right? Creating that win-win. We said we also, and originally we pitched this to the supermarkets and then found out they weren't interested. And then we said, but wait, we also shouldn't talk to supermarkets because that's also a middleman preventing us to create an accessible and affordable offering of coffee. So that's how we started, direct to consumer through your mailbox at scale. However, if you want to build it beyond those first 30 or 40,000 customers that have adopted Wakuli at home and they're drinking that on a bi-weekly or monthly basis, how do we build an actual brand that people can identify with and that goes further than your average direct-to-consumer shaving or whatever proposition comes through your mailbox but you don't really have a feeling with? And then we said we need to be visible in the high street. We need to be available in more places. We need to be also there for people who don't want coffee freshly roasted through their mailbox. I find it a great proposition, but my parents wouldn't want it, right? So in the end, we said, what can we do? We can or make a move to retail, or we can go B2B, right? Which is also an option because then other people can tell your story through their proposition. Or we can do it the hard way, but the fun way and keep the narrative with us and still be direct to consumer, but in our own stores. And that's what we piloted last year. We opened our first store in October, if I'm correct, in Amsterdam, in East Amsterdam, a tiny 25 square meter shop to get people to buy coffee at home, but also to have their coffee to go, to get them acquainted with our coffee without directly having to have it at home. And that actually went beyond expectations, which was really nice. Because at the same time, we were just coming out of COVID last year. And we saw, of course, a bit of a backlash online, right? I mean, I'm also going to be honest. Anyone who's now is going to call me and say, I want to start a direct-to-consumer subscription business online, I'll say, please don't do it. The environment is very different than 4 years ago. So we also need to diversify. And what we're seeing now is that with the stores that are highly profitable, 4 and counting, we're opening the 5th one next week, we're able to actually tell the story to people, convince them to drink better coffee, but also help them out to make it easy to drink better coffee. And at some point, they move or don't to online anyway. And we see a lot of synergy between the two.
How do you make these kinds of decisions? Are you very much a gut feel kind of guy, or do you run a lot of numbers, something in between, something else?
Not always. It very often starts with gut feel, and then you want to back it with numbers, right? Not only for yourself, also for our investor base, of course, and our own team to be able to explain what you do. But I remember we were talking about opening our own stores in 2020. So 1 year in, I said, down the line, my dream is to have one. Back then, there was one Wakuli store in every city. To be able to have one point of physical contact. I mean, you started the intro a little bit with my background is in food in the broadest sense, and I love connecting over food and food in a broad sense, food and drinks with people in a physical location, in physical space. So that has always been the dream. It was never planned for 2022 though. But of course, that's about adaptation, is seeing what how the market moves. And the opportunity we got, right, from our investor base to say, hey, we want to test this. We believe in this. We can back it with numbers. We see in the market that this is working, but we believe that it works for us in our storyline. And in the end, it's all about doing it and convincing people. And that's, in the end, running a business is doing stuff and convincing people, right?
Who are your customers?
Our core customers, anywhere between 20, 25, or 45. Light green, knowing a little bit that you can do better for the world, but doesn't want to be bothered the whole day with how difficult the world is. Wants impact, but made easy. Is living in an urban or suburban area. Online a little bit less, of course. We also see a lot of customers in more rural areas in the Netherlands, but lives in an urban suburban area and knows that consumption can be done better. Already doesn't buy the wine anymore in the bottom shelf of the supermarket and leveled up their game by going to a local wine dealer or maybe another chain. Got into sourdough bread recently, but still thinks, whoa, my Nestle coffee tastes actually okay. My Nespresso cups are actually fine, until they don't anymore. And then they can come to us.
And what does their typical journey look like? Because you mentioned in terms of the products they use, but how did they find you?
Well, originally, of course, still a lot of people find us online. We're very visible and vocal online, of course, running ads in a simple way, but also trying to show what we do, the farmers behind your coffee, and what goes into the process of creating this high quality specialty coffee for you. And where people find us online, they might first go into store or, of course, do their first purchase online. And what we're trying to do everywhere is lowering the barriers to try something different. Because you rightly so said before, it's a very busy shelf, right? Coffee is a busy landscape. There are many competitors, and it's an habitual product. And trying to get people to change their habits is difficult. I mean, coffee is one of the only, besides Nespresso, has never really been disrupted, right? And if we're looking at our markets with JDE, and this is only going to be for Dutch listeners, but Aroma Red, which is the most sold coffee today in the Netherlands still.
Oh, wow.
That is the same coffee that my grandma grew up with post-World War II. I mean, that's pretty scary, right? What other product you can name now that your grandparents were consuming in the same way you are? Something needs to change, we believe. And that starts by convincing people or by making it easy for people to actually make that change, right? By literally grabbing a coffee to go in one of our stores or by purchasing coffee at home. And if you saw your subscription, you spent around $7, including shipping, to have coffee in your household. So lower the barrier for entry and explain, why coffee can be done differently and why that is better for you. You make impact, but it actually just tastes much better. And that's the main reason to buy.
It does remind me of a relatively recent revolution in the coffee market with pads and cups and Nespresso machines. Do you look at that and draw lessons from it in order to be more effective in your marketing and your go-to-market?
Yeah, and you're totally right. The one big innovation in the last 20 years has been single serve. First the pads and later Nespresso. And Nespresso is also, I think one of the only great innovations in a way, great as in like in terms of valuation, in terms of money, great innovations in coffee done well by a corporate, right? An incumbent building something new, and nobody believes in espresso when someone in Nestle started pitching it, but it actually revolutionized the way we drink coffee. So what do? We make sure that people from every brewing method, so also a pot drinker, which I would never recommend, honestly. I'm now going to be a bit snobbish, but like you get screwed over when you buy pots, right? There's very little coffee in that pot and it still makes an okay cup, but it means that you actually pay a lot of money, very expensive per cup for very little coffee. With us as well, by the way, I'm going to be very honest about that. But what we're trying to do is make that journey for people who are used to single serve, who are used to their Nespresso easy, by also creating a product, but then better. So single origin, high quality specialty coffee from farmers that we know and you can get to know, put in a biodegradable compostable cup, home compostable pot, for your Nespresso machine. At the same time, we're also telling you that you can level up with us. So I can make for any customer that reaches out to us or that we can reach out to, the calculation that actually going to a machine, a full auto machine, right, that uses beans, that actually you earn back that investment in on average 1.5 years or 2 years, right? So we're there to help you to level up your coffee game, and leveling up, we mean going actually from single serve to pots, to beans, but we're not there to be snobbish about where you come from. We're there to make sure that the transition to better coffee is as smooth as possible, and therefore have also these kind of products.
Got it. Do you think you could have started Wakuli 30 years ago? And then second question, where do you think the coffee market is going?
Well, the first one I find super difficult, right? Because I'm 33, so always looking back at 30 years ago, what the market looks like is pretty damn tough. But no, I don't think so. I think the last 30 years, a lot has happened. And that is that geographical disconnect that we have between producing and consuming countries, that is fictive in a way, right? That is what big coffee makes us believe, that it's still impossible to tell where our coffee is coming from. Anyone ever, call the big guys and ask where my coffee actually comes from. They can't give you that answer. They simply can't. But it's not necessary anymore. The last 30 years, we've seen great improvements in the possibility to create transparency. And transparency in the end begins with trust, ends with the fact that if today you don't trust me, you are a badass journalist, I will put you on the phone with farmers in Tanzania, Rwanda, Congo, Myanmar, even though very difficult at the moment, or Timor-Leste today, because I'm anyway in WhatsApp with them. And of course, that 30 years ago was very different. So yeah, the time is right to create this transition and make sure that we eliminate bad coffee. And your second question, where's the coffee market going? Well, if we take the US as a proxy, which is a bit unfair because, of course, the US has a different background because they don't have that history in coffee trading and drinking low-quality coffee as in the Netherlands, for example, or in Germany. But what we're seeing is that people are going for quality, and the specialty market in the US in terms of value is now around 50% of the total market, right? Oh, wow. We're in value not even at 10%. We're seeing that people are moving to better tasting and more ethical coffee and choices in consumption. And we're seeing a new generation that cares about what they consume and they want to vote with their fork, if you might say, or in this case with their cup, to make sure that they drink better. And then practically, where does the market go to? It goes to cold coffee. If you really want to know, everyone right now below 25 drinks more cold and warm coffees in urban environments.
I'm shocked.
Yeah, so we're, for example, our bestseller this year for 6 months was nitrogen cold brew. So cold brew, draft, looks like a Guinness, tastes very foamy. It's 100% coffee, seats overnight. And that's also our big launch for next year to build on that offering also at home.
And what do you think is driving these changes? Because the technology part to me is quite obvious, right? Communication channels, also social media, etc. It's much easier to tell your story, to be in contact, to close that geographical divide. But there also seems to be that other wave you're surfing where people are willing to spend much more on coffee and food more generally. They're much more deliberate about, where it comes from. I think they spend much more time as well on, hey, what kind of coffee am I drinking? Would I like to try something else? Maybe taste different providers. Whereas a long time ago, it would be literally just that one kind of coffee you'd mentioned. People would drink it for 30 years and that was it. What do you think is driving the change?
let's first of all not forget that we're actually spending very little on average. I mean, I know that people right now, many people are in a tough economic environment, so I don't want to seem that I only see the Amsterdam bubble or the big cities that are big cities I live in. But we're spending relatively very little on food and drinks, right? If you look historically, but also in other countries where post World War II, we're spending almost 50% of our household budget on food and drinks. That is now around 10. That's actually super low. So we historically are actually not spending that much on what we consume. And I think that has been reversed a little bit in recent years because we're getting a little bit rid of this Calvinistic idea that coffee or food is fuel and that's just enough, producing enough is important and consuming enough is important, but nothing else is. And that there's a trend towards more home cooking, more of a restaurant experience outside, right? Better restaurants, better food, higher quality produce. Finally, looking a bit more for that connection of where does my produce come from, right? We're seeing a little increase in organic, of course, in supermarkets, for example. But obviously, it's all still very small. So let's not forget, and therefore I always say, JDE, the coffee your grandmother was drinking as well, I presume if she was Dutch, is still the most sold coffee. So let's not forget that, again, I mean, we're seeing a surge in more niche brands giving you a different experience and flavor profile, but a majority of people still drinks the same coffee. And I think we're there to fasten that transition. We're hopefully a catalyst to make sure that more people more quickly jump on that wagon to drink something that tastes better.
Yeah. How do you think about growing what you do? And maybe related to that, what percentage of your customers is now from the Netherlands versus other countries?
Yeah, we are, of course, based in the Netherlands. We're a Dutch company. And we also decided to first have a big enough footprint here before moving into other markets. And we are servicing German customers with our subscription and Belgian customers. Everyone else in the EU can purchase our coffee as a one-off, right? So can purchase bigger pouches or taster packs, etc. But our real focus is on our home markets to first make a dent into that huge coffee landscape, right? I mean, if you're looking now at how much coffee we roast, and that will be around 200 tons this year, 200,000 kilos of coffee, a little bit less maybe. Depends a bit on how the Christmas sales are going. That's 0.1% of all coffee being roasted in the Netherlands at the moment. Yeah. So we first want to make sure that here we actually have a certain market share before moving into big time into other markets. But Germany and Belgium and France are on our radar to conquer next, also with our shop rollout.
Makes sense. And let's talk about taste for a little bit. You lamented dark roast for a couple of times. Could you tell us a bit more about what's happening there? Why is everything dark roast? To me, it sounds pretty good, dark roast, tasty, but what's wrong with it?
Yeah, the issue with dark roast is not per se the dark roast itself. The issue is the underlying problem that you can mask any other flavor if you roast something very dark. Take a comparison of bread. Buy some very cheap bread in the supermarkets. You buy a very nice piece of bread at your local baker, and you both roast them to hell in your oven until they're black, right? You know when the toast tastes back. You're not going to tell me anymore that you like one way more than the other or that you can taste the difference, because it's all being roasted to the same degree that is the flavor that is predominant. And the issue with that is that we got used to drinking darkly roasted coffee because that was a way for the industry to blend coffees from all around the world. It didn't really matter what went in, which they could buy cheaply, right? Because you can shop around the world, because when in Vietnam the prices surge because of a climate crisis, you move to Indonesia, right? When Congo there's war and you can't move in anymore, you purchase it somewhere else. And by then, purchasing a low quality green bean, right? Because beans are green before they're roasted. A low quality green bean, and then roasting it to hell, it all tastes the same. So the dark roast is a way to mask flavor, and therefore I'm fighting against dark roast coffee until we all have great quality coffee. And if you then come back to me and say, but I still love my dark roast, then we will roast a great quality coffee a bit darker. But to mask flavors and also to mask the incompetence of the incumbents, right, of big industry to actually purchase high quality coffee and pay an appropriate price. That's what we're fighting against. And therefore, the dark roast has made us believe that that's quality, right? It even is sort of there's an Italian style to it. Dark roast. It's even advertised on packaging. I mean, how dare they? But I understand. I mean, it's an habitual product, what we're used to and what we thought one day was good.
I've noticed that Wakuli likes to put medium roast on its packaging.
Yeah, we have light and medium roasts.
Mm-hmm.
That's how far we go. We don't roast super light, also on purpose because we were talking about accessibility, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if I want to move you as a customer from Nestle, from JD to us, I can't go too funky on you.
Mm-hmm.
I need to know where you are currently in your coffee journey, right? And need to make sure that we are the next step into specialty. So if you look at our house blend or our powerhouse blend even more, it is a bit more of a traditional coffee in the way that it tastes like chocolate and a bit nutty, but still that high quality that we strive for. And then at some point, if you're used to that flavor and you say, well, I would love to taste strawberries in my coffee, go to the Discover Monthly and taste our coffee from Rwanda, for example. It's like a strawberry milkshake. But going from the supermarket to that coffee is too much. So we need to make sure that journey is as smooth as possible.
Got it. What's a good way of thinking about taste in coffee? There's the roast, so the excess of light roast versus very dark roast. There is Robusta versus Arabica. What other excess are there to categorize all kinds of coffee?
There's the X of very chocolatey to very nutty to very fruity. There's the X of acidity versus bitterness, which has to do with the roast, but also with the type of coffee. So there, Robusta versus Arabica is in play as well. And then more specifically, I mean, when we're tasting coffees, which we're doing 3 times a week, we taste all coffees that go out, all roasts that we do, we taste a sample of it to make sure it's consistent and well roasted and suitable for you as a customer. We, of course, go a step further, and within nuts, we taste certain nuts. Within the fruit realm, we look at fresh fruits, or we look at red fruits or yellow fruits, right? We're looking at 4 types of sugar. Is it more Muscovado sugar, or more brown sugar, or more caramel? So we can go as deep as we want, but you don't need to go there with us, but we will tell you what we taste in it, because that's also half of the fun, right? In the end, I mean, do you drink wine, Hugo?
Yeah, and I've done wine tastings. It reminds me of that.
You've done wine tastings. I mean, let's be honest. The first time that you went to a wine tasting and people told you it tasted like peaches and rose petals, you were like, yeah, probably. What? Now I can taste it, maybe. But you would have never come up with a descriptor of peach because it's all about training, right? Flavor. And we want to bring you along with it. You don't need to taste what we taste, but we will tell you what's in there and if you can find it. Because if people help you, remind you, or remember you what you might be able to taste, then it's easier. That's half of the fun as well.
Do you organize tastings yet?
Yeah. One of our locations in Amsterdam, on the Jan-Pieter Heijenstraat in Amsterdam West, we not only built a bar and retail outlet there, but we also have a tasting room next to it. And that's every week or maybe every second week right now, we organize public tastings where or our sourcing manager or our impact manager or our lead roaster will give you the whole tasting experience for an hour and a half or 2 hours. And sometimes we also do brewings there, right? So for example, you are an espresso drinker. You can come there to learn how to pull the best espresso shots, or you love your pour over, so you can learn how to make the best filter coffee, or cold brew, right? We had a cold brew session this summer as well, which was super cool. And we're trying to engage as much as possible with customers. So at home, you will get a brew guide if you want. You can go to My Wakuli, right? Your own Wakuli environment where you organize everything around your coffee subscription and get to brew better with our advice. But yeah, for sure, we want to have many customers as possible also come to taste.
Count me in. And Yorick, you mentioned that the next specialty coffee that will be sent to me and many others is from Congo. Could you tell a little bit more about you going there, the situation in Congo, farmers and the cooperatives you work with, and the impact that you guys are having there?
Yeah, for sure. So Congo, for people who don't have the geography of Africa as straight, which makes sense, right? 54 countries. It's a big continent, much bigger than Europe, by the way. Sometimes a bit overlooked still. But the Congo, or DRC, is a country in Central Africa, and the Congo Basin is the Central African basin. On the right of it, you find Rwanda, Uganda, and then Kenya, Tanzania on the seaside, on the Indian Ocean. And Congo, all the way to the other side, also has access to the sea on the west side. And Congo is huge. Congo is, top of mind, around 15 or 16 times the Netherlands. It is in the Human Development Index, one of the lowest ranked countries in the world, around 186. It has been in war constantly, mostly because of interference historically by the Belgians. Congo, the DR Congo, sorry, little history lesson, but the DR Congo used to be the private property of King Leopold II. king of Belgium in colonial rule around the end of the 1800s. And I say private property because you can imagine that was one of the only colonial states that was actually owned by a person and not by another state. So even worse than being owned by another state, it was owned by one person. And King Leopold called that petit gâteau africain, my small slice of African pie, even though it was 36 times the size of Belgium, right? So just to be clear. Now, they've extracted everything from coffee growing, but also copper, gold, and other minerals. Congo, one of the most mineral-rich countries in the world. I mean, if you drive a Tesla right now or have an electric bike or have an iPhone, something in there comes from Congo, most probably. And historically, also after colonial rule, everyone has interfered in that country, from Rwanda, Uganda, to the US government and the CIA and everyone else, to make sure that they had that little petit gâteau africain, that little piece of Africa that was so mineral rich, but so bloody poor. Government is absent at the moment. And in that absent government, there's sort of a vacuum where around 70 armed militias, only in the eastern Congos, on the east side of the country, that has nothing to do with the capital, Kinshasa, on the west, are fighting for those minerals backed by different powers. In that whole war-torn eastern piece of Congo that is close to the border of Rwanda and Uganda, there's an island in a lake. The lake is called Ijwi. And on that island, the island is called Ijwi, the lake is called Lake Kivu. And on that island, there is a cooperative that is Rebuild Women's Hope. That's the name they chose themselves, to focus bottoms-up, ground-led by Marceline, Congolese woman from there, and her husband Bertin, led by them to create prosperity for all women and everyone involved in coffee production. So with a focus on women, if you focus on women, they say societies prosper. Congo, named by the Financial Times as one of the worst places for women to live on the world, has a huge issue with gender equality, even bigger than almost anywhere else. And women historically can't own farms, can't export coffee. And all that coffee was locally produced was smuggled into Rwanda. There were no export markets. There was no opportunity for economic prosperity. In the absence of that government, Marceline said, if we now, through coffee, create a social network of women on the island, and it's an island with 300,000 people. We're not talking about Texel. We're not talking about a tiny island. If we, through coffee, actually create economic opportunities for women, then we might have a chance here to prosper and to show as an example to the rest of the Eastern Congo how we can live in peace together. And that's what she did. And that's what we're helping her with, creating that dream. And they're helping us with one of the most tasty coffees ever. You will taste it next month. Just in short, right? They built a vocational center, so women are learning other trades besides coffee growing, because outside season, then they can go into sewing classes or other stuff. They've built a hospital, the only hospital on that side of the island, where actually the sister of Marceline is the only doctor in the hospital. That hospital has been built with premiums that we pay on coffee. And in the end, what they are showing, they're some of the most badass entrepreneurs I ever met, Marceline and Bertin. Really, really cool. What they're showing is that when everything else is absent, you can still make a change. And they're making the biggest change I've seen in any origin, actually, or one of the biggest changes I've seen in any origin we work with.
It's an incredible example, I think, of how coffee can change the world in this case.
Yeah,
really cool.
Yeah, and employ 1,400 people,
wow.
For example, right? Wow. And during harvest, but also have over 2,000 members that are actually now selling coffee at a very high premium. To us and one other buyer now, luckily in the US, and we're still trying to find other purchasing partners as well.
Yeah, amazing, and I think very inspiring for everyone all over the place. Like if the two of them can start a business like that in Congo.
Yeah, and then if me or my co-founder are talking about any hardship or anything that doesn't really, that we don't really like, we're like, but wait a second, let's think about Marceline and her environment, and then we should really shut up here. Yeah. And the cool thing is, Marceline was with us and met some of our online customers because she visited us in the Netherlands last year, and we had a tasting session, and she gave a presentation to a number of our interested customers. And seeing those worlds connect is why I started this business. Showing that it's actually possible to connect the seemingly very disconnected people. Marceline and I remember this couple, an elderly couple, I think in their 70s, that came from Eindhoven by train to shake Marceline's hand because they loved her coffee. Seeing that happening under our roof was proof that it's possible to do what we do.
How did you get to the idea of Wakuli?
So long story short, 10 years ago, 11 years ago, I had my first gig in coffee through the Slow Food Foundation. And I was for the first time seeing coffee growing region in Ethiopia, and I was mesmerized. I was like, whoa, is this the product we're consuming every day? Nobody has a clue it's actually a cherry or a berry that is grown in a forest environment, if it's done well. That has to be handpicked throughout a season for 3 months and then fermented and then washed and then dried for 30 days on beds under the sun and then exported and roasted. I was like, this is super, super exciting. I mean, if you're into food, you're like, is this the way it's produced? I need to do something with it. And at the same time, I saw the disbalance between how we divide the profits of coffee production. And at the same time, it's one of the, again, biggest traded commodities. So also a huge impact to be made if it's done well. Fast forward, living in Tanzania, I had a job. I worked for a few years as a consultant for coffee farming communities, coffee cooperatives. And I helped them on access to markets and access to finance. So actually what we're doing now practically in the chain, I used to advise them on. And advising, and it's very interesting, but at the same time, I was running into a wall. I was living in Tanzania. I lived in Dar es Salaam and also in a small village for a year. And I was living a few years there. I was working in the whole East African context, moved to Nepal, lived in Nepal, worked in South Asia in the same context. And always the same thing. I was working with smallholder farmers. We were doing projects and programs that were very interesting, but always CSR related, right? So corporate social responsibility of the big incumbents, trying to show the farmer behind your coffee on their 1% of their whole coffee business. And I was actually not doing great in feeling better about what I was doing at some point. Because like, am I just helping to greenwash the sector at large? And that's the moment, having worked a few years and lived and made many friends in the coffee context in the Global South, decided together with my co-founder, who at that moment was a venture builder. So he was way more on the startup side, building tech and consumer ventures for corporates, saying, hey, I see an issue in coffee. I think it can be disrupted. Well, and when I said the word disruption, I think that he was like, oh, finally, I found my problem, right? Because many people want to start a business, but they don't have their problem yet. And we put 1 + 1 together and decided, well, in 2 years' time, when we were still doing this part-time, but decided at some point to launch Wakuli as a possible solution to the inequalities in coffee.
Awesome. I'd love to switch gears a little bit, Yorick, and talk a little bit more about your personal journey. You've seen a lot of the world. You've lived in Italy, Tanzania, Nepal, London, Amsterdam. Could you describe your journey and what the red thread was throughout all of those locations?
Well, I don't know if I'm making up a red thread now or it was there from the beginning, right? But in hindsight, I moved away from the Netherlands when I was 20. I grew up in a small village in Drenthe, in the north of the Netherlands, and lived there my whole life, a very safe life, until I was 17 and moved to study here in Amsterdam. I've always been interested in food. And that has been, I think, in the end, again, going back to food, that has been the start of everything. And it had a lot to do with the fact that my parents are the worst cooks ever. I hope they will never listen to this podcast. But they are the worst cooks because they didn't care. They were the post-World War II baby boom generation. It was about quantity and having enough and making sure there were some vegetables in there and that's it. Right?
Describe a typical dish for us in the Bruins family home.
If my dad would cook, between brackets, he did that once a week, he would buy a frozen pizza and then put extra toppings on. And then he wouldn't call it cooking. So he would put extra cheese and like a paprika, like a bell pepper on there. And then say, oh, it's our vegetables. And then we would eat a pizza. Or chicken tonight. I don't know if you're aware, if you're familiar with the products. It's a very disgusting pineapple, tomato saucy type of chicken with dry rice. Yeah, those two are really memorable. And the rest I don't even want to talk about. It was very low in flavor, very non-exotic. Do you recognize this at all?
You had to do something about it.
Yeah. No, and the thing is, and that's honestly, I think I still thank my mom for it. She said when I was 12, she said, I hate cooking. So you can or complain or do something about it. So you get a budget. And I remember I got €2 when I was 12. The euro just got introduced, and I got €2 per family member. And on Wednesday, I was free in the afternoon, so I could go to the supermarket and purchase food. Well, starting off with the typical stuff that the 12-year-old cooks, but at some point, evolving a little bit into a little bit more sophisticated meals, where I started experimenting and actually ended up loving to cook. Again, fast forward 18, 19, started my small catering business here in Amsterdam. together with a friend and actually cooking for bigger groups of people, people turning 40, turning 50, anniversaries, marriages, whatever, and just cooking great food with local produce, trying to connect farmers and consumers. So back then, first time that I thought about, okay, what does the food system look like and what can we do to do this better? And we were trying to look for good produce. So talking to fishermen, farmers around the Amsterdam area to understand how we can work more directly with them and actually have high quality food, but also a story to tell, right? So that happened. Meanwhile, I was looking for, I studied law for a good 2 years.
Can happen to the best of us.
Yeah. Oh, for God's sake. I was 17 and had to choose something, right? The typical story about studying law here in the Netherlands. Well, it wasn't something for me at all. I was way more curious about going out there, actually understanding more about the food system, and ended up studying food science. So food science in Italy, because there was a university there that was doing something very progressive. They were putting a lot of elements of the food system together. So I studied a bit of agricultural science. I did philosophy of food. I studied chemistry of food and anything in between. And it was more of a holistic view on how we can look at food as an agent for change instead of an issue. So how do we grow food from now to 2050? How do we do that healthy for humans, good for the planet, well, within planetary boundaries, etc. And there, that really opened up my eyes because I had opportunity to work a little bit in Argentina with a local community on how they use their food as medicine. I was in Ethiopia in coffee. I've seen a lot of the world, and especially through that food lens, which made me go to London, where I ended up studying food policy. So how do we feed the world in 2050? Which made me end up in Tanzania, wanting to work on the other side of the food system, trying to understand how to work with smallholder farmers and created access to markets, to Nepal, and back to the Netherlands in the end, which has always been about eating better, creating a more future-proof food system, and making sure that there is a win-win in every trade in the end, right? That there's a win-win between better quality on the one hand and a better outlook to the future on the other hand.
What are the biggest misconceptions about food?
Yeah, it's very difficult to talk about misconceptions in the Netherlands, but I think one of the biggest misconceptions about food in the startup world, so in my environment, is that we're all eating better and healthier and are consuming better. That is simply not true. We're talking a lot more about food. We're watching way more food shows, cooking shows and food shows. I mean, they're everywhere, but we're not per se cooking way more. So we like to talk about food. We like to look at food. We like people to cook for us. But we didn't really move a lot into the direction of cooking at home way more, for example. We also, even though I was yesterday night, I was at a great lecture in the Bali here in Amsterdam, talking about eating less meat. I mean, we're going into the Christmas period. Most meat is consumed in this month in the Netherlands. 50% of consumers say they're flexitarian and want to eat less meat. But at the same time, on average in the Netherlands, we're still consuming per capita 6 times a week, 100 grams of meat a day, 6 times a week. So we all talk about being flexitarian and changing a little bit and changing behavior, but we're not really. And I think that's the biggest misconception about the food system at the moment, is that transition is going very quick. And yes, the transition is happening. We are seeing it in coffee. We're helping that transition, hopefully, a lot in coffee. But it's not going as quickly as we all see. And I think you also see that in other startups, for example, in alt meat, it's not going right. Valuations went down like crazy. It's not going as quickly as we all expected, right? The adoption rate of alternative meat and protein is way slower than ever expected, for example.
It's been a bloodbath. And you said the red thread has been food, but it also feels like you're very dedicated to not only better tasting food, right? But also like better sourced and also getting the people involved, getting the people in that value chain, starting with the farmers, a better life and a bigger share of the pie. Where did you open your eyes to that part of the food world?
That has been the first time I saw coffee growing. And I saw people, without talking down to anyone, but in absolute poverty. And I don't like to talk people about being in poverty because that's not for me to normally say what poverty looks like, right? But objectively saw people that were not thriving at all, producing a cup of coffee that literally was produced for Lavazza, because I was working on a project with them. I can just name them. And at the same time, knew what I was paying for that coffee when I was living in Italy back then. I was like, where is this coming from that we can't manage to create a bit more of a fair and equitable value chain and fair and equitable world? And when I'm talking about good food as a red thread or good food as something that has been leading for me, good for me means that everyone involved has been treated well, and that there's more to it, right? Also, when I talk about wine or food or cheese or veg, talking about who produced it or where something is coming from, understanding how it's been produced, for me, contributes to it being good, right? Good in a broader sense than just good tasting. Because a good taste, I believe we can all make that happen, but good, feeling good about it, understanding more about it, it's also the fun part, right, of eating and drinking, at least it is for me, makes up good food in a more holistic sense.
Got it. Yeah. So there's a lot of things actually involved.
And it's so bloody complex. And we're continuously making trade-offs, right? I mean, we're not perfect either, to be clear, not at all. We're just on our way to make a little dent into that whole coffee system and ecosystem. And you're continuously making trade-offs because you can't do perfectly. And we have to make around 200 food choices a day as a consumer in the Netherlands.
200.
And that's very unconscious, obviously, right? You don't consciously make 200 choices, luckily. Otherwise, we couldn't be doing anything else anymore. But unconsciously, we're making a lot of food choices continuously. Of course, we can't expect everyone to think about everything the whole time. And therefore, at least in coffee, I want to make sure that I'm credible enough for you, that you trust me to make that decision for you, to make impact. And then you can just consciously choose for that coffee, and that's it.
Got it.
And I think more companies are doing this in other areas, and we need to trust, of course, in these companies to do right.
What are you proudest of when you look at Wakuli or other endeavors?
I'm proudest when I see consumers and producers come together. And that's a very boring thing maybe to say, but I'm talking to both, right? I'm on the one hand on the consuming end. When we stop this call, I'm going to one of our bars. I'm going to run a 2-hour shift with one of our baristas, the barista team, just to also keep a feeling with our customers to make sure what they actually ask, what do they look at. And 2 days ago, I was on a phone call with our partners in Southwest Tanzania. So for me, that opportunity to talk to both is unique and is what makes my day fun. And when that comes together, I'm very proud because that's what we make happen, right? We're in the end matchmakers between tastemakers on the one hand, the coffee farmer, and consumers who want more flavor. And if we can put that together, I'm very proud. Second proudest thing is our first store, because brick and mortar is very different than the direct-to-consumer online business. And when the first store came together with a team that was originally focused on online and made such a big pivot into a 4-wall business, right, into brick and mortar, that seeing that come together and then seeing a first customer walk in, I will never forget.
Can you imagine? And what's tough for you in this journey with Wakuli? What are the things you've struggled with?
A lot of uncertainty. I mean, I had a pretty decently paying, cool job with a lot of holidays and a nice house, actually paid for by the company even. Imagine, like that's in Nepal, that's possible. And I had fun in my work without all the stress. And I think that one of the main things why I wouldn't do this, I would do it again if I would go back in time, but fast forward 5 years and Wakuli is a success, let's hope, right? I don't know if I would do the same again, because you wake up with it and you go to bed with the business. And that takes a toll on the people around you, my partner, on my personal life. And I'm fine with that because I have the most fun when I work on Wakuli and with my colleagues. But that also is the toughest. It takes over everything. It's 24/7 on your minds. Even when you're off on a Saturday walking through the city, I'm looking what other retail is doing. Whenever I'm in someone's home, I'm looking what is in your cabinets and why you drink what you drink. When I meet someone in the streets, it's always about coffee and Wakuli and understanding how we can speed up this transition.
Coffee is everywhere. And
coffee is everywhere.
Have you developed sort of habits or tactics to deal with that? How do you keep yourself sane? How do you relax?
Well, no, I haven't, honestly. I'm going to be totally fair. I've tried many things. Now, what really helps is trying to say for a day, I'm not looking at any metrics, right? So making sure that you don't nitty gritty update yourselves with the latest sales numbers online or in stores, which I do normally do way too much, right? Also being able to let go and trusting other people. And I think I've got a great deal of trust in general, but when it's your own business and when you know there's so much on the line, because in the end, there's not so much on the line. I mean, if we wouldn't be there, the world goes on. But at the same time, we're working with 14,000 small holders. We're supplying 35,000 bags of coffee to people's home every month. I don't want it to fail, but the main tactic is still to let go and trust other people. So don't go in the weekend and check if something is going on, but make sure that people will solve it themselves. And we've got a great team to do that. So I'm very blessed and lucky that we actually have that team to trust, right? And I think that's the main thing. And then with my partner now and then, trying to say, this day I don't talk about Wakuli or anything related to Wakuli. And then I'm often quiet for a bit, but then we find other topics to talk about.
After some digging and digging and digging and digging.
Yeah.
And do you have heroes, people you look up to, people that inspire you to do what you do?
Well, I get inspiration from people and from different people. I think from people close to me, like first of all, my co-founder, and secondly, my other LT, so a leadership team member, Mies, who's our CMO. When I see how dedicated they are, I'm always like, okay, this is real dedication, and I can learn something from it and from the team as well. In a bigger sense, what I find very cool is disruption in a broader sense. People who said it can be done differently, the vision and persistence that people have to change an industry at large, way more disruptive than we're doing in coffee. I think that's really inspiring, right? In a way. On the brand side, there are a few very good examples of people who have built great brands that I think are super interesting, including, for example, Jan Belman from Tony Chocolonely in the Netherlands as a smaller example. So yeah, there's a lot of inspiration from different people. I don't have specific heroes.
Got it. And do you have people around you that you go to for advice on Wakuli, that you reach out to whenever you have a question in a certain category?
Yeah, absolutely. We have per topic, we have a number of advisors that we can call. We're lucky and blessed that we have such a great network of people built up the last few years that believe in what Wakuli does. Well, that or came on board as an investor or simply an advisor, people that we can informally call. This morning I came from a meeting with, for example, Mark de Lange, founder of Ace & Tate, how they built a true omnichannel business, right, between online glasses and stores. And whenever I'm talking about store rollouts and our next steps, he's the guy to call, right? Or building a brand, right, in the Netherlands, for example. Investors like Willemijn Verloop, who has built brands and companies and NGOs throughout her life. Yeah, there are many people we luckily can call and have a speed dial. Former founder of HubSpot, Nick van Aalst, now works with us on the transition to offline. Also, of course, a locally owned business, but was very successful for many years in retail. We've got financial people from, for example, Joe and the Juice, very different company, but European-based, hundreds of stores. Former CFO on the board. Well, we have many people that that can help us out.
And what are the most important things you learn along the way? Like the things with the biggest impact. I'm sure you learned thousands of small things, but I'm really looking for the big game changers for you.
Well, what I personally learned for myself is that what I really like is the flexibility in having to redefine your job every 6 months or every year. Or we've had a slower year, maybe every year and a half. But where a year and a half ago I was fully focused on disrupting our value chain and making sure that was solid, right? And that we had good partners in origin. We now have a great team already for years, but a great team that took over in impact and sourcing. And I'm building retail source, right? I'm in the lead of our out-of-home expansion. So you have to redefine who you are the whole time and sort of let go of the idea that someone is an expert in it and therefore should do it. But if you should create the opportunity to build that expertise around you and go with it. So go with enough information, right? Take that 30 hours of learning, but not the 3,000. Making sure that you have enough experience around you and at the same time enough gut feel to be able to go forward and then learn on the job. And in the last year, I've spoken to almost everyone who has anything to do with retail in the Netherlands and beyond. And I believe that is at scale. And I mean, I've learned such a tremendous lot. And I'm absolutely not an expert, but I feel comfortable enough now to lead our expansion to the next 10 stores in the coming year. And I think I've learned to trust on the advice of others, but also make sure that you keep your own pace and course to make sure that you keep to, in the end, what you believe is the most important. And in our case, to get people to drink better coffee wherever they are. And that should always be the mantra, not in favor of short-term gains, not in favor of a better P&L or anything else. Because if in the end, that's the way we want to change the industry, we should stick to it because we believe it's the way to do it.
What would you recommend to people in, say, their 20s if they want to start a business?
go talk to anyone who's already done it, and just talk to as many people as possible and bother people. I mean, I get bothered a lot, bothered in a good way, through LinkedIn or other media, just to talk for 20 minutes and get someone's ear, right? Talk to people on the investor side. Talk to people like you. Talk to people who are in the industry that you're trying to or disrupt or change something in or contribute to. And just make sure that you say, hey, I know nothing. We did the same. I know nothing, but can I please have 20 minutes of your time and drink a coffee? And do that with 50 people. You have a clearer idea of where the market moves to, where you might be able to find funding for your idea, how your idea can develop, or how you should kill your idea altogether and do something else. And I think the other thing is it's keep on going, and it's super typical. But we had 2 other business models to disrupt the same idea of coffee before we came to a direct consumer model. Then we both tested. Then we put a lot of time and energy and all our personal savings in, and that was totally useless, we thought back then. But having tested it and not succeeded made that what is now working is actually working better, because we know that we should stick to what we do and not move into that direction. And we've learned a lot from those mistakes. So we try to, just as a small sidestep, but we try to have a B2B marketplace. So we said, what if all farmers that are actually now already on WhatsApp, what if we could get them on the marketplace, and we could get roasters on that marketplace as well? And we create a level playing fields, right? Between the two, being able to communicate directly about quality, about pricing, about what is needed on both sides. We thought, well, marketplaces were also, like at that moment, everyone was talking about marketplaces, right? It was also just a sexy buzzword. But we thought, if this works, it's very scalable. We get everyone on the platform and we just disrupt the sector at large. Mm-hmm. The only thing that we oversaw is that roasters weren't interested at all, because we were not solving an issue for them. We're making it more complicated to source their coffee. We're making it more expensive because they felt responsibility for producers. And we made it more difficult because they now needed to deal with individuals instead of just with an importing company. So it was great for farmers, probably. We could have onboarded 1 million farmers, but we would have never sold a batch. So in the end, that's how we learned that we should roast ourselves, right? And that we should be that actor and be in between the farmer and consumer in the end. So, sorry, very long answer. Going back to your question, perseverance, right? Try a few times and make sure that the first 2 fail, because it probably will. And if you settle already beforehand that failure is okay, then you can stand up again, even though I had times as well where I thought, let me just go for a real day job again.
What I'm hearing as well is learn fast. Learn by talking to people that know what they're talking about, and learn fast by trying, basically. Yeah. Don't theorize too much.
And fail fast. I mean, that's one of our real mantras at Wakuli. Yeah. If you want to do something, do it. Don't doubt, but do it quickly. Fail fast, because that's way cheaper than failing slowly. So fail fast and make sure that you then learn from it and do something else. And be able to kill your darlings. I mean, I also have vanity, right? Vanity projects where I said, this is really going to work. And it didn't work out. And then you need to be honest to yourself and say, even if I believed in it and it was really my pet project and I think it can conquer the world, we don't see that in the data. We don't see that in the market. Kill it and move forward and kill it fast.
I think that's excellent advice. And Yorick, before we wrap up, is there anything you would want to share with the audience?
Well, if there's anyone in there that is looking to invest in a nice Series A for 2024, more than happy to reach out to my co-founders in the lead or to me, because we're raising a new small round of finance to make sure that we keep making this impact and enlarging our footprint and create more accessibility and availability of our coffee, first throughout the Netherlands and then beyond, in stores and online. So if anyone is interested in this kind of proposition and has value to add, obviously, then more than happy to get in touch with them. No, and besides that, look in your cabinet at home and see if the coffee you're drinking is something that your parents or grandparents were drinking, and then make sure that you level it up, because it's not that hard and way more fun for you.
And try Wakuli. I highly recommend it. Visit the stores, try the subscription. Really, really good coffee. And as you've just heard, with a really awesome impact in the world as well. Yorick, thank you so much. Really enjoyed our conversation, and best of luck with Wakuli.
Thank you so much, and thanks for believing in us and for this conversation. It's really cool.
My pleasure.